Welcome, dear friends, to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery. Warm greetings to you all. I'd like to begin as usual by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Swakato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko opanayiko pachatang veditabo inyuhiti. So today I'm going to speak about the Dhamma. The title of this session today is Praising the Dhamma. Last week I talked about the Buddha, recollections of the Buddha, or the Refuge of Buddha, or Buddhanusati, sort of contemplating, paying attention to the qualities of the Buddha. For our meditation practice, this is one way of really lifting the heart and mind. And equally, in the same way, recollection of the Dhamma, Dhammanusati, as a meditation practice is really valuable for us to consider the qualities of the Dhamma, which I just chanted in Pali, and which we can look at during the course of this time. So the Dhamma, recollection of the Dhamma, this amazing term in Pali, the Dharma, it's the name for now the Buddha's teaching. The religion, in a way, is often referred to as the Dharma. I'm a Dharma practitioner. Dhamma has so many meanings, as many of you will know. It refers to the teachings of the Buddha. In this context, mainly as the Buddha Dhamma. The truth is another meaning of this word. The truth as was taught by the Buddha. The universal truth, the law of nature. Dhamma means law, Dhamma also means nature. So the way it is, reality, many meanings this word has. But in a way, when we consider all these different meanings, we can see how there's much to contemplate in their interconnectedness. Dhamma also simply means a thing, an object, a thing, any kind of thing. Dhamma is a word in Pali that simply means thing, and it also refers to mental states, as in like in the Satipatthana Sutta, Dhammanupassana, to contemplate the mental phenomena. So it also means mental contents, mental phenomena. It can mean thinking, and also any other kind of thing. Thinking, you could say, is another meaning of the word Dhamma. But mainly we consider this word to refer to the teachings of the Buddha, don't we? And to refer to the truth, the way things are. The Buddha was pointing to reality and showing us really through a recognition of the way things are, how we can free ourselves from all suffering and step off the wheel of samsara, the wheel of birth and rebirth, birth and death. So in this context, the Buddha, when he became the Buddha, he realized the fullness of the Dhamma, and he determined after some time that he would teach, he would actually teach the Dhamma to anyone who had willingness and interest to hear what he had to say. And the most beautiful teaching of the Buddha in many ways was his very first sermon, which he gave to his 5 spiritual companions who'd been practicing austerities with him for many years. Once he became the Buddha, once he made the breakthrough and became fully liberated from all suffering himself, he wanted to share, first of all, with those who had been supporting him in his practice, his teachers who'd sadly passed away and were not sort of reachable by the Buddha, but then next his 5 ascetic companions. And so he went to them and he gave them this teaching and probably many other teachings in order to enable them to make the breakthrough and to release all suffering, find their way out of all suffering. And so he taught the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Many of you will know this sutta, the first turning of the wheel of Dhamma. So this really is the, in a way, I would say, core of the Buddha's teaching. He laid it out for those first 5 disciples. And so, of course, in monasteries all over the world, we recite this sutta, frequently. And many of us learn, many monastics and others, of course, some of you may have learned this sutta off by heart so that we can recite it, we can contemplate it very deeply through repetition and through frequent consideration of the teachings here. So I put the reference for Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, this first sermon of the Buddha, in the chat, and I'm not going to discuss the whole sutta, but really just to point to the core teaching that the Buddha gave. Really, I suppose, 2 aspects. He spoke of the middle way, first of all, to try and straighten the view of his companions because they had been veering to the side of punishing and tormenting the body, extreme asceticism. And the Buddha pointed out to them, first of all, there is a middle way between this kind of mortification of the mind and body, self-mortification, self-torture, and the way of indulgence, which is the other extreme, indulging in sense pleasures and losing oneself in the sense realm in this way. He said there is a middle way between overindulgence and also asceticism, and this is what I'm going to teach you. And then he spoke of the 8-fold path as the middle way. So right speech, right action, right livelihood, right view, right understanding or right intention, right mindfulness, right focus, and right effort. So these he laid out for his disciples. This is how to practice the middle way. And then he spoke of the 4 noble truths. So suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering or the way out of suffering, and the path of practice which leads us to the way out of suffering. That is the 8-fold path. And here is the Buddha's teaching in its essence, the 4 noble truths. And he explained to his disciples how to relate to each of these 4 noble truths, this essence of the Dharma teaching. And he declared to them, that I have practiced in this way myself, and I have come to the end of the practice. I have achieved what is to be achieved. I've done what is to be done with this practice. And so he spoke of the first noble truth of suffering as that which must be understood. We need to understand suffering. We need to meet suffering, to understand, to stand under, to be with, to open to the ways in which we suffer, friends. And through opening to the ways in which we suffer, we can come to appreciate then the second noble truth, which is the cause of suffering. The Buddha said this cause of suffering, wanting and not wanting, wanting things to be other than the way they are, all constellated around desire, this wish for things to be different in some way, that I have more, that I have less, that I have this lasts forever or this goes away immediately. all the ways in which we try to manipulate the world to get some sort of fleeting satisfaction. This core root of suffering, the cause of suffering, is desire. And he said this desire, it must be let go of. Pahatabang. We have to release it. We have to let it go. We have to step away from it. And he said, I have completely relinquished, given up, done away with desire. And the third noble truth, and the end of desire. And the Buddha said this, the end of desire, the cessation of desire, therefore cessation of suffering, is to be realized. Sachikatabang. We have to realize this through letting go of desire and noticing how that is. We can realize the cessation of suffering in that moment, in that instance. And if we continue to practice in this way, then we can do away with all the causes of suffering, one by one, step by step. The Buddha declared, I have realized the cessation of suffering in full, in its entirety. And so he's both teaching the Dhamma here, encouraging what is to be done, how the path of practice is to be pursued, but also declaring his attainment and his ability to understand, to have given up, to have realized to the full, to the extent that he can then direct and guide us, And the fourth noble truth, the path of practice, he said, this is to be developed. Bhavitabang. We are to put this into practice. So the Eightfold Path is our way of life, is our route, is our guide, And the Buddha declared that he himself has developed this path to its completion, to the end. And so this first teaching of the Buddha really is the core of the Dhamma teachings, all the teachings that followed on. And he, as we know, taught these 5 companions. And as soon as they had enough understanding to be able to put his teachings into practice independently, or indeed they had attained the end goal of the path, then he moved on and he tirelessly taught for 45 more years, taught the Dhamma. When the Buddha was contemplating his realization, his attainment of Buddhahood, Sammasambuddha, one who attained the goal, realized Nibbana, realized the end of suffering without any help and support from anyone else, on his own. Once he realized and became the Buddha, he contemplated in solitude for some time, for some weeks, we're told. And the Buddha explained, to his disciples, many occasions, what this process was and how he put together in a way all the Dhamma teachings kind of crystallized for him during that time, how to convey what he had undertaken and what he had attained, what he had achieved, if we can call it an achievement, his letting go of all suffering, how to convey this to others. And so he developed the conceptual frameworks that we know as the Dhamma during that time. And he also questioned for himself, what can I possibly pay homage to? What can I revere as the Buddha? Where can I incline the heart in veneration now? And of course, as a Buddha, all the people around him, wherever he went, if they had any intelligence and insight, they were inclining their hearts towards the Buddha in veneration and honoring the Buddha, praising the Buddha, and devoting their attention to this person and taking in what he had to say, the Dhamma teachings, and trying to put them into practice. But the Buddha himself had this thought, to what can my mind incline? To what can my heart incline with reverence? And the answer came to him, what he worships, what the Buddha worships, what the Buddha honors and bows to is the Dhamma. So these teachings, or this law of nature, or this reality, the way it is what a Buddha reveres, what a Buddha teaches, what a Buddha honors. And so when we consider the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, when we consider the truth, we want to incline our hearts in just this way, to really honor, to make much of, to really elevate and praise in our hearts and revere the Dhamma. And, you know, in the world we live in at this point in time, we are bombarded with untruth, friends, as you know, and truth is something elusive in times of great turmoil, times of chaos. Truth is not only elusive, but truth is done away with, even by people who are in positions of great responsibility. And this is very concerning for us, and it really behooves us to seek the truth, to feel out what is known to be true, and to discard that which is not true. And this is our work as human beings, but most especially as practitioners, to love the truth, to cleave to the truth, to make much of the truth. And whenever we have a chance to support the sharing of truth with others, then we take that chance. And whenever there's a chance to point out where we might be meeting untruth or distortion of truth, at best, then we also take that opportunity to point out, you know, the uncertainty there. You know, is that really true? Can we be sure of that? It's helpful for us not to be duped by Mara in these ways. And as Dharma practitioners, we get a compass, we get a real sense of what is genuine, what has integrity and what does not. And it's important for us to keep honing our skills in this way, and always with a question mark, because what do we know? You know, what do I know? It's a work in progress, this understanding of truth. But this aspect of Dharma is something to really revere and honor and make much of and support in the world around us and in our own journeys. Let's give ourselves the gift of Dhamma. Let's give ourselves the opportunity to meet the Buddha's teachings, to study, to read, to hear, to take in the Buddha's teachings whenever we can, to enable us to hone and develop right view, contemplate these Four Noble Truths, you know, consider the middle way, consider how I'm living. Am I too much in the indulgent side? Am I too much on the ascetic side? Can I find the middle way in my lifestyle? And can I bring these Four Noble Truths to bear on my life? It's a moment by moment practice, always relevant, timeless. This quality of the Dharma, always applicable. Also to be applied to any situation. So to apply the Four Noble Truths to the situation we're in right now, we can inquire, you know, first noble truth, is there suffering? If there is any suffering to be found, can I understand it? Is it something that can be faced, open to, investigated? Is there physical suffering? Is there mental suffering, emotional suffering? And we then turn our attention to it, to the source of unease, to the feeling of unease, and paying attention to the feeling of unease in whatever way it manifests. we can begin to understand what's happening. And we can root out any wanting and not wanting that underlies that discomfort, because that will be there almost certainly. And in rooting out, in kind of shining the light on the source of unease, the wanting, the not wanting, the second arrow, we might have physical pain. Well, that's a sensation that one can be with. If there's suffering, it's because we want it to go away. We want less of it. We want it to change. Can we understand the second arrow, this wanting that comes in, and simply pay attention there, let go of that wanting, patiently allow it to fade, to fall away through our insight, through our wise attention, and then know the end of suffering. Recognize when that wanting, that not wanting has subsided. Third Noble Truth. Can we realize this? Can we appreciate this? Again and again, in every situation where there's suffering. And in following the Eightfold Path, Fourth Noble Truth, we are making opportunities for ourselves to wake up. In living the Eightfold Path, we're always promoting in ourselves, the peace that comes from living a good life, a virtuous life, the mindfulness that comes from practicing meditation, developing, stillness, developing, making right effort to kind of train the mind, to pay attention to the mind. And so we develop right view and we develop right intention. Following these 8 path factors, we are truly living a life of Dhamma. We are indeed praising the Dhamma. The best way to praise the Dhamma is to live the Dhamma, to be the Dhamma, to completely integrate the Dhamma with this life, this mind and body here. This is how we get to really praise the Dhamma. We can also contemplate the Dhamma qualities. We can give attention to Dhammanusati at times in our meditation practice. And, as I was saying last week, as monastics, we chant, we recite the virtues, the qualities of the Buddha, the qualities of the Dhamma, and the qualities of the Sangha every day. And so we consider these qualities, and we also take heart from these 3 refuges, that we have these really safe places to align our hearts and rest. We can rest in the Buddha, we can rest in waking up, being awake, being mindful, being aware. We can trust this, and we can trust the Dhamma as it reveals itself to us through the teachings of the Buddha and through our experience of practicing those teachings. This experiential understanding of Dhamma can grow in us. And it's a life work, a life process. It's a lifestyle for us. Maybe we can have a look at these qualities of the Dhamma that I recited at the beginning and really tease out the meaning here. And we can begin with Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo. Swakato, well done, well taught. The teachings of the Buddha, the Blessed One, the Bhagawa, Dhamma, the Bhagawa's teaching, the Bhagawa's truth is well conveyed, is well taught, well expounded by the Buddha himself. So we have these teachings. So the first line of this homage to the Dhamma is the acknowledgement that this is what has been given to us by the Blessed One, by the Buddha, and it has been well taught. As I was speaking last week, the Buddha is the one who has the quality of conveying the Dhamma suitably and appropriately to each and every being. And This is a rare quality, the ability to teach anyone, anywhere, in any kind of existence. And this the Buddha had. And so acknowledging this, Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, the Dhamma that is well expounded, well taught by the Buddha. It is sanditiko. Sanditiko means seen, visible. It's apparent. It's directly visible. These are the kind of translations. It's perceivable. One can see this. Sanditiko. It is understandable. When the Buddha was contemplating the possibility of actually not teaching after he became the Buddha, the famous story goes that was told by the Buddha on many occasions. His mind inclined to solitude and to peace, naturally enough. And he had the thought that perhaps it would be a waste of his time and energy to try to convey the profound Dhamma to people who are so steeped in ignorance, in sense pleasures. Their minds are so clouded because of the ways in which we conduct ourselves, friends. The Buddha had this feeling that, thought that it would really not be of any great significance if he were to simply quietly abide in peace. And as we know, the story goes, one of the gods, Sahampati, came to beg him, please teach the Dhamma, because there are some who have little dust in their eyes and they will benefit from what you have to convey, that they will understand this teaching. And so this quality of the Dhamma, Sanditiko, it is visible, it is possible to see if we can pay attention, if we can open our hearts, if we can open our eyes. It is visible. It is easy to see if we incline ourselves to the Dhamma. So it also has the quality of, I'm going to jump ahead a bit, but it has the quality of ehipassiko. Ehipassiko, one of these qualities of the Dhamma, literally just means come and see. But it has this quality of invitation. It's inviting us. It's beckoning us. It's enticing. When we turn our attention to the Dhamma, we have a love of truth. There is in us this natural joy, this natural inclining towards that which is true. And we probably all feel this. There's a love of truth that we have. Our hearts are quite naturally dharmic. They are genuine. They are pure, and they are seeking our greater happiness always, and only go astray when there is a lot of confusion, delusion, ignorance, clouding our vision. So this quality of the Dhamma also of inviting us to come and see. This word ehipassiko, variously translated as Bhante Sujato, Bhikkhu Bodhi, as inviting inspection. Venerable Siddhaso describes this as tangible, which is a really beautiful translation. My favorite translation is actually Ivy Horner's translation of ehipassiko. Ivy Horner was translating Pali text way back in the first part of the 20th century, I think, back in the 50s, 40s, 1950s, 40s. And her translations are a little bit dated nowadays, but I love her translation of ehipassiko. She translates it as a come and see thing. The Dharma, friends, is a come and see thing. It is inviting us to come and see. And when we get interested in the Dharma, it will lead us onwards, lead us forwards. This quality, opanayika, It's leading onwards or leading inwards. It's inviting us to continue our investigation. Once we get interested in the Dharma, if we really open our hearts to it, it will lead us, it will take us all the way. It will change us. It will change our lives. It will transform us. And if we have wisdom and if we're fortunate enough, we allow that to happen. So these qualities of the Dharma, Oppanayiko, also means like it's relevant. It's always relevant. The teachings are always applicable, as I said before, to any situation, wherever we are, whatever's happening for us. We can apply the Dharma teachings, bring in the Four Noble Truths, consider that. Is there any suffering? Why is there suffering? Can I let go of the causes of suffering? Bring in the Eightfold Noble Path. I jumped ahead. I missed out. Quality that comes after Sanditiko, visible, is Akaliko. Akaliko means timeless, or it means out of time. It means time is not relevant here. It means there is no time. It is beyond time. The truth, the reality is timeless. This concept of time does not apply here. So we can consider this in many ways. There's great depth to this one word and its consideration in relation to the Dhamma. One thing we can say about it is the Dhamma teachings are timeless in terms of their applicability throughout all time. So wherever we've lived, situations we've been in throughout history, we could say human history, these Dhamma teachings will always have been relevant and applicable and of use, of benefit. They're universal teachings, we can say. In this regard, we can say Buddhism is not really, something that wasn't created by the Buddha. This label, this sense of a religion, implies often belief systems. This Dhamma is not at all that. It is, one could say, one of the meanings of the word Dhamma is religion in the present day context, but actually the Dhamma is universal. It's the universal truth, and therefore it transcends religion. Because every religion, every religious practitioner would understand the Dhamma, if they incline their hearts towards it, as universal. It's applicable to one and all. It has no belief system attached to it. It doesn't require us to incline towards any particular stories, any particular faith, in any concepts. On the contrary, the Dhamma is inviting us to let go of conceptualization, let go of stories, and seek that which is true, that the truth that underlies those things. And so the Dhamma is universal, and it's the Buddha Dhamma is not a religion. It is an exposition of the universal truths, the laws of nature, you could say. It is natural. Dhamma means nature, means natural. And so back to these ways in which the Dhamma is contemplated, the ways in which we can honor and venerate the Dhamma. We can venerate it as timeless, akaliko. So just to recap and finish with the last aspect of Dhamma. Firstly, swakato bhagavata Dhammo. The Dhamma is that which is expounded by a blessed one, by one who is awake. It is what one who is awake will speak about. It is the way one who is awake will speak of Dhamma in this natural, integrated, true way. Sanditiko, it is directly visible, it's apparent for anyone who inclines their attention toward it. Akaliko, it is out of time. It is a timeless teaching, a universal teaching. Ehipasiko, that's beckoning us, that's inviting us to come and see for ourselves. Opanayiko, it is always applicable, it's always relevant, it always has its use, it's practicable in every situation. And the other meaning of Opanayiko, it leads us onward or inward. It is bringing us along. If we incline our hearts to the Dhamma, it will lead us forward. It will guide us. It will take us towards freedom from suffering. And finally, Pachatang Weditabo Winyuhi. This Pachatang is the individual Pachatang for each one of us, for each distinct entity. Weditabo, it can be known, it can be experienced. So there's no being who cannot experience truth. And truth is to be experienced by each one for themselves. Winyuhiti, this is the kind of person who will experience the Dhamma, is the person who, in their inclination to open to the Dhamma, has wisdom, and through their inclination toward Dhamma gains wisdom, the wise one, the discerning one. So this path is to be known, this teaching, this Dhamma is to be known individually by the wise. So that's the beautiful recitation, the words of the recitation of Dhamma, the opening to the qualities of Dhamma that we have in the monastic chants, the pujas that happen in monasteries every morning, every evening, reciting these qualities and considering these qualities. And it's good to recite in Pali, it's also good to recite in English and to translate for ourselves these words. If you look up these words, then you'll see many, many other nuances in the meaning. It's very helpful to go to the Pali and to translate for oneself. We also have Bhante Sujato, Bhikkhu Bodhi, Ivy Horner, and also Bhante Siddhaso's translations on Sutta Central. They're available. So you can compare and contrast different translations and really let these words go in and tease out the meaning and contemplate the meaning and understand them through giving time and attention to these qualities of the Dhamma. Very beneficial practice, Dhammanusati, consideration of the Dhamma. The Buddha himself inclined towards reverence toward the Dhamma. The one thing that a Buddha could revere was the Dhamma, is the truth. And we too can feel that this gives us a direction to really make much of this refuge. The Triple Gem, the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, these three refuges are, for those of us who really devote our time and attention to practice, they are our friends. They are truly that which we can align ourselves with in order to know the safety, the security, the embrace of this path of practice in its fullness. And so the Dharma is our great friend and our great refuge. And equally, I put a sutta from Majjhima in the suggested reading, which is Majjhima 108, Gopika Moggallana Sutta. We can see in this sutta how the monastics at the time of the Buddha related to the Dhamma in this way also. Gopika Moggallana was a Brahmin in Rajagaha, and after the Buddha's parinibbana, all the monks, many of the monks we're told, gathered at Rajagir to translate, to recite, to discuss, and to crystallize the teachings of the Buddha that they knew, that they had heard. The Buddha had gone, and they wanted to preserve the teachings, to preserve the Dhamma. And so Ananda was present for this great council, this great meeting, a very important person in this respect, because he had an eidetic memory. Ananda could remember the words of the Buddha in their entirety. And he was the Buddha's faithful attendant, as many of you will know, for many, many years. And he listened to the Buddha's teachings. He even said to the Buddha at one point, if I'm not present when you're teaching, please will you repeat the teaching to me when I come back, when I'm with you, so that I can remember it. And so Ananda was the one person who had the most recall and most familiarity with the Buddha's teachings. And so the Dhamma, after the Buddha's parinibbana, after the Buddha passed away, the Dhamma became the sort of pillar of the Sangha life and practice, and naturally enough. And in this sutta, anyway, the Brahmin, Gopika Moggallana, asks Ananda, so the Buddha has gone, who is your leader now? Who is the Buddha assigned to lead the Sangha now that he's gone? And Ananda said, we have no leader. We have no person who's been assigned to lead the Sangha now that the Buddha has gone. We have the Dhamma. The Dhamma is our leader, the Dhamma Vinaya. So the teachings of the Buddha and the lifestyle of the monastics, constraints of the monastics through the Patimokkha, through the rules that we follow, this Vinaya. This, combined with Dhamma, is the leader of the monastic Sangha. The Dhamma is the leader of the full-fold Sangha, along with our precepts. So isn't this a beautiful statement? And in the same way, to this very day, if you ask most monastics, who is your leader, who do you look up to? They may say one of two things. They will probably say, the Dhamma Vinaya is my guide. The Dhamma Vinaya is what I take guidance from. And they may also refer to some teachers. At the time of the Buddha's parinibbana, or shortly after, when Ananda was spoken to by Gopika Moggallana, he said, the Dhamma Vinaya is our leader, and also we incline towards following and being guided by the Arahants. Any Arahants who are present are trusted, to lead and to guide us. There are actually a number of qualities that Ananda stipulated that are required for someone to be a leader of the Sangha. Arahantship, also knowledge of the teachings of the Buddha, knowledge of the suttas, also, and it goes without saying really, virtue. Any Arahant is bound to have a heart that is unable to transgress the precepts, but virtue is also one of the qualities, and also the 6 knowledges. So the ability to summarize in a way that's helpful, I would say the ability to understand karma fully, to understand their own situation fully, and to understand others, where they're coming from, what they need in order to make progress spiritually, and where they're heading. So these kind of knowledges, also a mastery of the material world, and ability to communicate over great distances, these kinds of qualities. But above all, to have freedom from suffering, a heart that is unshakable. Such persons are capable of leading the Sangha. But if there are no such persons to be found, friends, then and always the leader of the Sangha, both at the time of the Buddha himself revering the Dhamma, and after the Buddha's passing, from that point until today, the leader of the Sangha is the Dhamma Vinaya. The leader of the monastic Sangha, the Dhamma Vinaya. The leader of the fourfold Sangha is the Dhamma, and our precepts, whatever precepts we're keeping. How beautiful, how clear is that? So I think that's probably enough talking for now. Thank you for your kind attention. I'm going to have a look at the chat. Thank you everyone for your presence for the live stream. Also, all of you who join later, of course. Good day to you. Nice to see your familiar names, friends. Okay, I have a question from Japal Sin. Thank you, Japal Sin, which I'll read out in full and show you. Here we go. Dear Ayya, I follow as closely to Dhamma to the best of my ability, but I'm at a crossroad with matters not of the earthly world. Recently, my grandniece appeared to be possessed by some unknown forces. How do you view this issue? She is only 4 years old. Yeah, that's really concerning for you. And I'm sorry to hear about it. And it is remarkable how little we know about health and both physical and also mental health issues. And there's so many mysterious things that happen we cannot really explain in our rather materialistic, rather undimensional, lacking in dimensions way of relating to the world. I've noticed how in Asian cultures there's much more appreciation of different realms, different planes of existence, different kinds of beings that we may not see, but nevertheless that are around us and that are working sometimes towards benefit for others and sometimes in harmful ways. And so whatever's happening for your niece, it can be helpful to have, very open attitude and to seek help and support wherever you can. And certainly in the past, we know from history that people often in times of sickness, particularly mental illness, they'd have a clear understanding that such and such a person is possessed by spirits, or that there's other beings involved. Nowadays we tend not to think in that way largely, but in Asian cultures they still do. And I know as a Catholic by upbringing, there's an understanding that sometimes one can call on spiritual support to try to alleviate suffering for people through banishing, the forces that are acting upon them. We talk about exorcisms, and there are exorcists in the Catholic tradition who will go and work to heal through exorcisms. And so for whatever's happening with your niece, I just hope you can take resorts anywhere and everywhere, the conventional health supports, and also alternative health supports, and also spiritual supports. And what can you do? How to deal with? You asked me how I view this issue, so I think I've said a bit about that, but I would also say for yourself to be present for the situation and to lend your good heart and to offer compassion and loving kindness. I don't really need to say this because I've no doubt this is what you're doing, but my sense is just to say generally for us all, if there's some suffering and we feel powerless, we feel maybe we don't really know what's going on and we can't do anything very useful, we can always remember that it's so valuable and useful for us to pay attention, to be present, to be practicing equanimity, practicing loving kindness, practicing compassion. These are very healing powers, in this world, in this universe, and these we can offer. And oftentimes, let's face it, we often don't know what's going on, but these qualities which we can cultivate and make much of are always going to be of help and support. So wish you well with your supporting for this difficult situation for your niece, and may she be free from suffering, may she be at peace, may she find healing as soon as possible. And friends, we can all consider her in our hearts and practice metta for this child. We don't need to know her, we just need to bring to mind this question of Japal Sin and practice metta for this person that we've heard about. Yeah, thank you, Japal Sin. And I have, okay, got a question here from Dharmika. Thanks, Dharmika. There is one chanting Kusala Dhamma. What is it all about, Ayya? Okay, that's a chanting Kusala Dhamma, Kusala Dhamma, Baya Kata Dhamma. And so it goes on. This is a funeral chant. Actually, it's from the Abhidhamma, and it's simply a list. The funeral chants are, when we hear funeral chanting, we may feel a sense of comfort because monastics have come to offer chanting, and we can just allow ourselves to relax into their relaxation and their energy as they're chanting. The actual meaning of the chanting has very little to do with the funeral, one could say. On the other hand, one could say it has everything to do with birth and death and the way out of suffering. Profound Dhamma in these funeral chants. Kusala Dhamma, Kusala Dhamma. Kusala means wholesome action or wholesome things, Dhammas, wholesome mind states, wholesome truth. Akusala Dhamma, the unwholesome. Abhiyakata Dhamma is the neither wholesome nor unwholesome. The funeral chant goes on to describe all the different aspects of reality, that which makes up reality. It is a sort of breaking down of all that we know into its component parts. So it's a very valuable thing to consider, the meaning actually of these chants. And why would we chant at funerals in this way? Because the person who's passed away has had to let go of all that was held to as true and genuine and real, and what they're then left with, the consciousness that remains, is left with simply the reality, the deeper reality of the components of all things. So we go through our lives with a sense of me and mine, my life, my personality, my family, my job, my this, my that. When we come to the time of death, if we are in any way attached to any of these concepts, these apparent realities, then we will suffer. But if we open our hearts to the way things really are, then there is a breaking down of all these attachments, a letting go of all these attachments, therefore a letting go of all these concepts, and opening to the deeper reality in which there is no birth and death, there is no personhood, there's only constant flow and change, no self. So one cannot then fear death, one cannot die. There is no death. What can die? What dies is only the manifestations, friends. And so in this way, the funeral chanting, the Kusala Dhamma chant, is something to really investigate, translate for yourself, and contemplate the meaning. In brief, that's what I can say. Thank you very much, Dharmika. And Cute Lemon has a question. Okay. What is the difference between Advaita Vedanta, unborn Brahman, and Buddhist true nature? Yeah, I don't know enough, I would say, about Advaita Vedanta to be able to speak on this topic, because I'm not practicing Advaita Vedanta myself, so I can't presume to do that. But I would say that there are many, ways in which Advaita Vedanta and the Dhamma teachings of the Buddha are quite interesting to compare. They're quite complementary in many ways, as of course one would expect, because any investigation of Dhamma, any spiritual search is likely to lead us to the truth of the way things are. And so there are, in a lot of the kind of other ancient Indian traditions, there is great wisdom and great insight. And sometimes there's a slightly different framing. And it's very interesting to compare the different conceptual frameworks and to see what you can understand and learn from them. Personally, I've always found, I've studied Advaita a little bit and also many other religious traditions because of a love of anything that's leading us towards greater health and happiness, you know. Um, but I must say that my inclination for a very long time has been towards the teachings of the Buddha, the Dhamma, because it is so vast, it is so complete. There's so much there, it's like literally is like an ocean, the Dhamma ocean. And, for me, it's sort of, I dived into it 30, 40 years ago, and I'm still swimming in there. And there's always more, So I can only really speak about the Buddha Dhamma, but with great respect and appreciation for all the other great religious traditions and frameworks and searches and paths, No doubt, all the spiritual paths and all the spiritual traditions are really pointing toward the universal Dhamma in different ways. Yeah, thank you for that question, which I couldn't really answer, but thank you. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for your very kind comments and big appreciation for your kind attention, which makes this Dhamma sharing possible for us. So gratitude and all good wishes for your investigation of Dhamma. May our dive into the ocean of Dhamma lead us to the end of all suffering, friends. Let's conclude by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Buddha who taught the Dhamma, Swakato, well expounded by the Blessed One. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.